Welcome back to the Tuesday Weekend, the podcast that hasn't changed a single behavior in 2 decades. Yeah. All right, that's completely wrong. But
I wouldn't
okay,
say.
one of the things I've talked about in the past is really requesting when you eat out to show a little patience and gratitude. And I don't mean you, Nick, I mean everyone. Just a little bit of patience and gratitude goes a long way. And I will acknowledge that I have seen some guests who get it, who understand, hey, it's busy, it's going to take a minute, and still tip well, are still concerned about, I don't know how else to put it, but kind of my experience as a server as I'm dealing with them. But I also get it from the other end because I try to be a good customer. There are some people who get it. A lot of them are people who have worked in the industry or know someone very close who has, but there's still plenty of other people out there who think a 10% tip is still acceptable, or 15,
Don't even
or
get me started on that.
you know. And once again, I am going to say breakfast servers get run the hardest for the worst tips.
Oh yeah.
And they do way more work for you than $1 and some change, you know.
Well, and getting into the whole tipping thing, okay, here's your changes in 20 years ago. When I first started, it was $1.68. Then it was $2.13 for like 15 years because of the stupid restaurant credit that everyone uses, saying like, oh, well, you'll make minimum wage, so I'll pay you this much, and then you'll make up the difference in tips. And that, if we're going to step into that, then that was horrible. Like, one nice thing in California and 6 other states is we get minimum wage to bartend, to serve, to be a barback, to, like, we don't get the $5, $7 thing. I'm making, in San Diego, I'm making $17.80 an hour to 10 bar. And then we get raises, so plus that. But when I worked every place else, it was $2, it was $3 an hour, and you live straight on tips. I was telling some guys this from the Midwest, and they had no idea, and they're in their 40s and 50s. Like, seriously? I'm like, yeah, you live on tips. You don't get an hourly. I mean, you guys are literally the ones paying my rent, my car payment.
Absolutely.
And the tipping thing as well, it's 20%.
20%.
It's 2024. It's 20%. It's been 20%.
That's where you start.
Decade.
For at least.
At
Even
least.
when I was managing a restaurant in Manhattan in 2008, I wanted to put billboards up at all 3 of the airports in the New York area that says, welcome to New York. The tipping standard is 20%.
If you can't tip, you can't go out. I'm like, and you're all working towards a thing where your favorite restaurants like Chili's and Applebee's and shit are just going to be counter service where you order, they put a number down and bring your food out, and that's it. Hey, guess what? Don't have to tip. You're happy. You have to tip that extra $5.
Already, one of the breweries here in town opened up another location in the town about 15 miles south of us. And I heard it was because of staffing, though I'm not certain that that's the actual reason. But it is a counter service where you go up, you place your order, and then they will text you when your food is ready, and you come back up and pick it up.
Bar X in Salt Lake ran like that. They did the beer bar next door, and that was, you'd go up and it was straight up picnic table service and great beers and cocktails. But you went up to the front, ordered, and sat down. No one checked on you. No one made sure you had extra ketchup. You just,
that's it.
If you didn't get it, you walked back up and got it yourself.
When I was in Boulder last year, the place my friend Trey took me to was like that also. I mean, it was essentially a 2-story bar with the food counter right there, and that's where you go get it. And
I mean, Underbelly out here right now is just like that. It's a ramen place, and that's how ramen places are in Japan. You walk up, order from the counter, sit down, they bring your food out. That's it. If you're sitting at the bar, you can ask the bartender, hey, can I get another beer? But you've already paid and stuff usually. I mean, if they know you, it's like, do you want to keep this open? Do you think you want another drink tonight? And usually there's so much, I'm just like, no, I'm good. But people like, well, they just stand there like, you can sit anywhere. And people just look around like, and I'm like, you can sit at the bar, you can sit at the tables outside, you can sit at the tables upstairs, and we'll bring the food to you. Like, what if we want more to drink? Then you come back down to the bar and you order. They're like, well, what if I need more water? You come back down to the bar and you get more water. That's just how it works. And you don't have to tip on that.
Sure.
You should, but you don't have to tip on that service.
Correct.
Something in that same vein is, again, back when I was working and making, drinks for $4 or $5 and you were tipping me $1, that's fantastic. Now that I'm making drinks that are $18, $20 and you're tipping me $1, I mean, your round is $54 and you just left me $3.
Okay.
That's about the taxes I pay on that round.
I had a group this past weekend where it was a couple of beers, a couple of shots, and a couple of cocktails, and they tipped me $3. And it's like, okay, well, this half of the order, sure, $3 is appropriate. What about, like it would have been appropriate to tip me $3 just on those two cocktails.
What people also don't understand is I've got other guests. I don't really have to serve you as fast as you want or as much as you want. I mean, if you
sure.
tip me bad once or twice, that's you and that's it. Hey, everyone sit over 10 minutes. I'm like, yeah, I know, I'll beat you in a minute. And it's like, oh, well. And I'm like, what? You've tipped me like garbage the last 2 nights. You really think I'm going to jump over and, what do you want this time?
I mean, that's it. Especially at the casino I'm bartending at right now. Sure, initially people will come up to the bar, but then they're sitting at the machine over there, and I go around to them to see if they want another. And absolutely, I am going to the one who tips better first. Why would I not?
And then these same people who do this, they sit at the bar, they sit at tables like, oh, take your time, no hurry. And it's like, yeah, there is a hurry. There is an urgency. And that's something that's changed a lot in the last 20 years too, is back when I worked, everyone in the restaurant had a sense of urgency. Sure. You want to get the food done as fast as possible. You want to have the timing of the meal work out. You want to have the drinks come out before the appetizers. You really want all that stuff to happen. And now people pretend like, oh, take your time. And it's like, they think they're being low work for them. Like, oh, just take your time. It doesn't matter. And I'm like, yeah, those people get super pissed off if their drink takes 10 minutes.
Oh, sure.
They do. Even though they said, take your time. And I've told them, like, if I take my time and you're not going to get a drink for 10 minutes, if I just stand around and talk to people, it's like, I've got a lot to do. I mean, I had a guest last week who's like, I'm muttering to myself what I need to do because I had a full bar. I had 10 people at the bar. I had 6 tables and like 5 of the tables were full dinner service. So I'm slam busy and I'm just going, like, okay, do this. They're just like, what do you say? I'm like, I'm telling myself what I need to do in the next 5 minutes. Oh, well, what are you saying? And I'm like, I need you to stop talking to me is what I'm saying. I'm very busy. You don't need to get into my thought process on how I'm going to take care of all these tables.
Okay. I do not have time to explain to you right now.
Thank you. Like my worst, and I hate this, is when someone sits by your well and what's that? What's that?
Ooh, that looks
what's
good.
that?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is a Mai Tai. Oh, what goes in that? And I'm like, I'm like, I don't have time to tell you every drink I'm making, all the ingredients that go in each wine. Please stop asking me what drinks I'm making.
Or I'm charging you $125 for a bartending class.
Pretty much.
Sure. Class is in session. Let's go.
I mean, that, and didn't really deal with this back in the day either. And this is another guest thing. When I make it at home, no one would really compare how you made your Jack and Coke at home to the one you get at the bar. We already knew. I was in Telluride with Glenn once, and we went down to one of the juke joints during, Blues and Brews, and he showed up and handed me a drink, and it tasted like a Glenn drink that Glenn makes at home. And we're in a bar. So I'm just like, damn, what, seriously? And he's all, yeah, they pour pretty stout here. And I'm like, yes, they do. I mean, there's places that do that. There's places that don't. When someone says my drink's a little weak, I just look at them like, you want a double? It's going to cost you to get extra liquor. Where I'm not giving you extra liquor for free because you're an alcoholic.
Sure.
That's not how this works.
I am, let's say, not shy with my pours.
Yeah.
So don't come telling me that you think it's too weak, because I know for a case that it is not.
Dude, we use jiggers at my place. So, I mean, it's just straight up. If you want a double, it's going to cost you double.
Yep.
And people, hey, make it strong. I've had people like, hey, put more. I had a lady one night, she's like, fill that up. And I'm like, she wanted like a Jack on the rocks. And I'm like, fill this up? She's all, yeah, fill that glass up. And I'm like, you ordered a single Jack on the rocks. She's like, well, it needs to be stronger. And I'm like, no problem.
Yeah.
Filled it up. There you go. And I'm like, looked at the glass and I'm like, okay, and here's your tab. And she's just like, you're charging me $45 for this. And I'm like, yeah, because that's how much liquor's in that glass. $45 worth. That's
a
filled up.
Third of that bottle right there. Yeah.
It's just like, I mean, it was a legal amount, but it was still, I'm just like, that's how much you ordered. That's what you're getting. And you have to pay for it. You don't just get extra for free because you want more.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. I mean,
but now people seem to think it works like that. They really do. They're like, I need my drink stronger. And I'm like, then you need to pay for a double.
And you need to be tipping me better too.
Yeah. If they're asking for a stronger drink, they're not tipping in the first place. You already know that.
Geez. Yeah. That
as soon as someone says, hey, I had these guys come in, it's like, oh, you're a little slim on the alcohol you put in that glass. And I'm like, you haven't even tasted the drink yet, man. I'm like, what do? Just fill it up with alcohol and a splash of tonic? And he's like, well, yeah. And I'm like, we're not at your house. I can do that. but it's going to cost you like $30.
Yeah, right.
He's like, well, I'm not paying that. And I'm like, I know you're not. You want a free strong drink. I'm like, where are you from? And he's like, oh, we're from Tucson. My family lives in Tucson now. There's good people in Tucson. I have had maybe 2 guests in the 10 years I've lived in San Diego tip 20% in 10 years from Tucson. They want super strong drinks. They want more food on their plates, and they think everything's a ripoff, and they tip like absolute garbage. Yeah, Tucson, I'm calling you out. So
yeah, you know what? Cities are expensive. Prices are going to be high.
yeah,
Sorry.
when I live in the most expensive city in the country, it's just going to cost a lot here, and I don't want to hear about it.
Well,
I don't care.
All right, I do want to get, there is one more point on tips that I wanted to make, and I have before advocated for a standard minimum tip. Like if you're going out, even if, for breakfast and it's $12, I still put a 5 on the table, because there's no way that the server did less than $5 worth of work for me. Sorry,
if it's under 20 and you're getting food service, and I mean service, it's a minimum $5.
It's a minimum 5.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So you had your whatever bacon and eggs and coffee and stuff, and it was like $14. Throw the 20 down and just walk away.
Yeah. Yep. That's it. So kind of the thought that occurred to me is, when you eat out, are you tipping a minimum wage? And now, sure, bars and restaurants are a little different, but if you're sitting at a restaurant table for 2 hours and you're leaving a $10 or $15 tip, that is unacceptable.
No, it's
especially
like you're sitting at one of my tables. You owe me $34 for 2 hours.
Yeah. So I mean, just a notion to put out there. And,
yeah, it's a good one too. I like that.
If you disagree with that, if you do agree, put it down in the comments. Let's talk.
Yeah, please. I mean, that's a great idea.
I kind of like the notion of like, all right, well, if I'm here for an hour, I want to make sure that I'm tipping at least $15, regardless of what that bottom line amount is. And now, sure, if it's more than that, of course, you tip higher.
There's a few restaurants out here, and it says on their menu, it says when you like make reservations, we will add a 20% gratuity to every check.
Yes.
This is non-negotiable. If you think your service was over the top, great. Then anything you leave extra or any cash goes straight to your server.
Yes.
But again, I sat next to a table in this restaurant, like, well, we're not doing the 20% thing. And the server's like, and they taking their order and stuff. And they're like, well, give me 1 second. I'll get my manager. And the manager comes out. I was like, so is there a problem? Like, well, we don't believe with this whole 20%. He's like, well, then you can leave.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? And he's like, please leave. I've got people who want to sit here and we'll do that. You need to leave now. We gave you the rules. You're not following them. And people get so pissed about that when it's like, here's how we do this. And like, well, I don't like that. And it's like, we don't care.
And because people are so used to the way it has been,
that
any sort of change, I know, other places who have, hey, we're tipless, we just, service charge everything. Sometimes those restaurants close. And now, sure, there are lots of reasons why a restaurant can close, but part of it is, if your clientele is resentful towards the bill, or just the way the bill is formatted. But again, it's one of those where, somebody would be perfectly willing to buy a $10 sandwich and leave a $2 tip. But then if it's a $12 sandwich with the service charge included, that's no, I'm not. That makes no sense to me.
Well, it's the same thing with these. When you've got the QR code for the menu, be like, oh, I don't like the QR code. I want a menu. We've talked about this before. And I'm like, dude, you just sat here for 10 minutes staring at your phone, but you don't want the menu on your phone. Really? That's a big deal to you.
It's too onerous to do. Yeah.
And the other thing too that's changed in the last 20 years, and this goes hand in hand with the tipping thing, is that this isn't so much the guests, but the guests need to be real. You have to understand, it's called the Darden theory. It's basically what Olive Garden and them did, where all of us who make tips are now being forced to tip out the rest of the restaurant because the restaurant will pay them a living wage. I'm out talking to guests. I do a really good job. I make a lot of money. And then there's apps and stuff where it comes in. You just tip the host this much. You just tip this person this much, this person this much. And it's like, I didn't see 3 of these 4 bussers tonight. Why would I tip the other 3 bussers out if I've got 1 busser in my station?
Yeah.
And you have to tip out a certain amount, but you are basically, your front of house staff and all the restaurants you eat at now are basically paying everybody in the restaurant who works there because the owners are cheap. Plain and simple. They're just cheap. Everyone out here is having a problem keeping cooks. And I'm like, just pay them $20 an hour. We can only pay them like this much. And I'm like, I know. Add $3, tell them they can't get overtime. They'll be perfectly happy working for $20 an hour. for an 8-hour shift where they don't have to get overtime.
Well, and maybe
Just pay people.
yeah, just
And
pay
they don't.
people.
And having us pay people is horseshit.
Yep, absolutely. And the restaurant industry still remains one of the ones most riddled with wage theft
Oh
in the
yeah.
first place. And then also there's plenty of there are a lot of places where at the end of the night you're doing your cash out. If you have credit card tips, some places then essentially just give you cash for that tips, and because
Well,
the accounting part's on there,
not
a
much
lot
anymore.
of places it shows up on your check, and
It's
there is so much room for nonsense in there, for shenanigans.
I had that
that
happen.
yep
I had a check get screwed up. It happened like to half our staff. Half our staff got more money, they just the computer fucked up. So
okay.
they owed me like $1,100 in tips. And like it'll be on your next check. And I'm like, okay, fine. And it was on my next check. And then they took 980 of the 1,100 that they owed me for taxes, where I'm like, you can't take my tip money for taxes. And they're like, well, you owe this much in taxes. And I'm like, then I will owe that much in taxes when I pay my taxes at the end of the year. It even says you can't touch my tips except to give them out to people that I've signed off on saying, okay, you can tip the bar back, you can tip the busser, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they were just like, well, I mean, they ended up having a class action lawsuit against the restaurant because a whole bunch of people in this restaurant group realized that they'd been taking our tips and paying our taxes with them because their CPA was an idiot. I've got friends at a restaurant right now, and the guy that it's new ownership, and the guy is taking money out of their tips for their taxes, but he's telling them, I'm only holding it until you get your payment on your paycheck. And I'm like, dude, I guarantee that first paycheck, you go through every day and add up the tips that they have on there after they've taken the taxes out, and that's what's going to be on your paycheck. You're getting fucked. And like, they've had 3 people quit just this week from that. And it's a solid place. It was anyway. But no, I mean, their main manager is done. There are 2 bartenders, 2 of their bartenders, one just flat out walked out. The other one gave her 2 weeks the same day. They're all like, this is bullshit. We're not doing this. And the owner's like, I don't see what the big deal is. And I'm like, you're robbing your employees and they know it.
One of the things that has not changed about the restaurant industry is the leading cause of an employee leaving a restaurant is still a bad
manager. Yep. I've had good managers. I have bad managers. My reason for leaving almost any job that I have left has been the management. I make money any place I work. I really do. I mean, I can adapt. I can work in different areas, different places. But if there's a bad manager, it doesn't matter. You're not happy. You're not making money. They're going to mess stuff up.
All right. So if you're a manager, don't suck and tip well, regardless of who you are.
And if you're a manager, don't give away the house to make a table happy that's just going to come in and do it again.
Yeah.
If you ever watch that Putty Bistro video set, which I think are freaking hilarious, they've got one where these people come in and it's like Valentine's Day or something, and they give him a rose and they're really upset about it. Like he's hitting on it. And then the manager's like, okay, fine. I'll buy you a round. The woman's like, oh, well, I'll take a glass of this, which in my head is immediate. I'm like, well, that's like a $40 glass of wine. He's like, yeah, I'll take the Whistle Pig Big Boss. And I'm like, okay, that's an $80 glass of bourbon. And and the manager's like they just rattle it right off as soon as he said, I'll buy you a round. And it's just like, oh, okay, I see what just happened here. And yeah, that's what managers do now, is to placate our guests. They just give them stuff. It's what people do with kids. It's like, oh, my kid's being a little brat. Here's a phone with a cartoon on it. Watch this for a while. They don't do anything to fix the problem. They just placate the problem until it happens again. And our guests play on that now. They know they're going to get free stuff if they complain. They know that they can get this and this and this and this. And that is bad management. That's just like, no, this is our business. This is what we do. And that's it. If you don't like this, maybe you should go to someplace else. When you're working for the manager who is like, we need every single person in here every single night, that's where you run into big problems. Like when I started the restaurant, I had a bunch of regulars from the restaurant come in for happy hour. And they're like, yeah, we want a couple of loaves of the free bread and we each want 3 glasses of Pinot Noir. And I'm just like, well, you don't get bread at happy hour for free. It's $3 a loaf and you get 1 drink at a time. Happy hour ends in 10 minutes. So I'm not serving each of you 3 glasses of $5 wine. You get 1 glass, that's it. What if I slam the glass of wine? I'm like, I will give you your check and ask you to leave. You were sitting in a restaurant. You were not sitting in a dive bar. Yep. I'm like, was your plan to sit up here and just like eat free bread and drink 3 glasses of wine for like 2 hours in the middle of my dinner rush? And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't happen.
No, don't do that.
And then my happy hour sales went through the floor for like a week and a half. And the manager's like, you can't tell people this, da, 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 da. I'm like, do you want to make money on this or not? 3 weeks later, I'm busier than I was before because people were coming in following the rules. And then after that, I was getting dinner tables instead of a bunch of jumped up jackasses drinking cheap liquor and eating free bread all night, which is how they were running it before. I don't understand why places go to that level of, oh, what can we do to placate people? Why are we trying to make this so much better for the people who just don't fucking deserve it?
Right. I mean, don't live in fear of the Yelp review
No.
managers.
I mean, the last place I worked, Yelp reviews, they went by the Yelp reviews.
Yeah.
We have, I guess, trained to know that, hey, if I complain or something, I can do that and get stuff for free. That didn't happen 20 years ago. You didn't have people showing up like that. I mean, we had one group in Utah, they would show up and try to get everything for free. They'd like, yeah, give me a Diet Coke with a shot of grenadine on the side. And if you didn't do that, they would complain about it and try and get stuff for free. And I was always giving them when they came in to eat, because my manager's like, okay, just be yourself on this one. You don't have to be super nice, Nick. And I'm like, I love this. And just go like, nope, you can't do that. Oh, we'd all like this chicken fingers thing. Well, that's for kids. It's on the kids menu. You guys are in your 40s and 50s. You're not getting the kids menu. Oh, my son's on his way. And I'm like, oh, your son's on his way. And your son is under the age of 9? Yes. And I'm like, how's he getting here? In a cab. I'm like, it's 11 o'clock at night and your son is on the way to this restaurant in a cab. Tell you what, he shows up before my kitchen closes. I'll buy you guys dinner.
Yeah, exactly.
In a cab. And they're just like, oh. And I'm like, yeah. So just stop. That was one instance. That is now nightly, where everyone's always trying to beat the system, find a loophole, blah, blah. Like, if you can't afford to tip, you can't afford to eat out. Stop trying to go out and get free food. Just go out and enjoy the ambiance. Something that's changed so much for our guests is there's so much good food out there now.
There is so much good
food.
So
many great places.
Overall, I was actually going to talk about this in the next segment, but like, people's palates have gotten better.
Much better.
You know, like, people are willing to eat much better food, and I love that. I think
try better
is
food.
A great thing.
Try different cocktails. Try different alcohols and stuff instead of just the vodka soda lime that everyone, the basic that everyone orders all the damn time.
All right, we're going to take one more break. We're going to get back to talk about palates and ordering new stuff. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.